Good morning, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, whenever you happen to be here. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. I'm very grateful for this little heater right now, but I do have to turn it off because there's just too much residual noise. So welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the Starseed Ministry. We're going to do a special transmission for today's broadcast. I have a reading to share with you for our December solstice. We're going to take a general look at the major astrological influences over the next couple of months for the changing of the seasons. And when I ask in the title of this transmission and the Starseed Ministry, what are your true blessings? It's because the pendulum is truly about to swing the other way, as it does every time we get to a solstice, because we are reaching either the peak or the valley in terms of exposure to the amount of light from our sun. And so, just like all other cycles, right, the pendulum is about to swing the other way. And as much as I would love to give a fluffy and nothing but positive outlook moving forward, I feel like, and I've felt this for a long time. Just kind of getting an idea of the eclipse season, right? Looking at that longer cycle, that coming into 2023, the calendar year of 2023, we're still finishing the astrological year, the actual year of 2022 as we move through the next season. It's not going to be boring, that's for sure. And what I anticipate is another level of establishing for ourselves what are our true blessings. Because, you know, going through this time of year, regardless of where you find yourself on the planet, either you're going into summer or you're going into winter, that you're either reaching the peak amount of light or you have reached the bottom of the bell curve and awaiting for the return of the life force and the vital energy provided by the sun. Regardless of where you are, the sun is still in Capricorn in the zodiac, in relation to our planet and in relationship to the sun and everything else. And what's very interesting about this is, even though in the astrological chart and in the zodiac, the sign of Capricorn and the 10th house is the zenith, it is the top of the chart, it is the noonday sun, if you are tracking it on a daily basis. And what I find interesting, and has been corroborated by a number of conversations that are seemingly random and not connected, but we know how all that works. Well, it's like going through our own personal hell, and I can assure you that I am certainly anticipating and praying for my Christmas miracle, whatever that means to you or me. But I also know that many people have been going through some measure of their own personal hell, and this is the case every year around this time, especially here in the Northern Hemisphere, where we're going into the holiday season, right? Hanukkah started last night. We'll go through the 26th in terms of a calendar. We have the solstice on the 21st when the sun reaches 0 degrees of Capricorn. We have, Christmas here in the West, right? Or anybody who celebrates Christmas, regardless if you're living in the West or not, the connection to the 25th. And the idea here is that when the sun here in the Northern Hemisphere, for instance, reaches that bottom point, it kind of stays still. And that's the case if you're in the Southern Hemisphere and you are coming into summer, that the sun appears to be stationary in its position for those 3 days, and then it starts to come back out of its absolute depth, the bottom, right, the valley, or is about to swing over and start its descent into the yin part of the year. So either way you look at it, things are about to change. But this idea of being in hell, I think, is a really interesting one. And I want to give some time to speak on it before we go into the reading, because it's very challenging. And I do suspect that we're about to go into another very challenging time as this pendulum swings in a way that is we're at a point now where Pluto is at a position, especially in regards to the U.S. natal chart. And I don't mean to bring it back to that as if the U.S. is the center of the world, but there is a big part that the United States as an entity plays in this global story, and certainly the human story as we continue to go through these cycles. And it's part of the conversation right now. And Pluto has returned again to the natal Pluto point of the U.S. natal chart. And actually today, Black Moon Lilith, the lunar apogee in its oscillation, has returned again to Pluto's opposition point. So as an entity, as an event that has its own birth chart, has its own blueprint in relation to the birth chart. And for those who are familiar with evolutionary astrology, you know that it is the Pluto opposition in the birth chart that shows you the direction or the means in which the soul wants to evolve, is moving towards evolving, is finding balance in its own journey. And so every time Lilith crosses this point and is in an opposition to Pluto in these late degrees of Cancer and Capricorn, it is bringing this very deep, very primal connection that Black Moon Lilith represents, that space within ourselves that can only be filled with the divine fire or the divine light. It brings it back into the evolution of even this country every single time. And this point, 27 to 28 degrees Capricorn, we're crossing it for the final time in our lifetime, because even though Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius, which we will talk about during this broadcast, it will retrograde again, as these outer planets do, as all the planets do. But these outer planets have a very consistent yearly retrograde transit. And so, yes, Pluto will go back into its retrograde later in 2023, and it will retrograde back into Capricorn, but it won't meet this point going forward. It will come into that 28 to 29 degrees, which is still really close, but it's not technically going to cross that exact point where Pluto was at the time of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So we're reaching a point of no return in some ways, and I mean that almost quite literally when it comes to the soul of this nation that I am part of, at least, and what that means for the rest of the world, because that power is on its final pass of being released and showing us the direction that we are really meant to go. And when you look at the degree for 26 or 27 to 28 degrees of Cancer, which is the opposite of where Pluto is right now, where Black Moon Lilith came into an exact opposition. It is about returning to nature, right? To return back to a source that is deeper and more ancient than all of the cultural and institutional references that we have in terms of where is our power coming from. And all of this Capricorn energy, we have Mercury in Capricorn, we have Venus now in Capricorn, certainly the sun is about to come into Capricorn. So the themes around power, institutional power, political power, economic power, all of the ways that we crystallize a group process to give us a sense of security and power and really unfolding with the matrix of reality. And that, I think, more than anything else, is the living through the quote unquote hell. So without getting too much into all of the imagery about what hell means and what it means to different people, different religions, when we go through the Scorpio time of year, when we go into the depths or the abyss of our own experience, there is a hellish individual type of experience when we do this called the dark night of the soul, where the individual's ego is really given over to the investment into something greater than ourselves. And that's the whole idea of Scorpio, and even the 8th house in astrology, is that the total is more than the sum of all the parts. hearts. And that's where magic happens. That's where occult ritual really finds its power. Even something as mundane as cooperation amongst a group of people, communion. It builds faith and it builds trust, but there's also the opportunity to experience betrayal, to experience what happens when we are exploited for our trust in that process. So the dark night of the soul really does begin in the realm of the subconscious and in the depth of who we think we are, because we are faced with the opposition of that experience in relationship. This is, in my opinion, the whole point of being in this experience of 3D, whether you want to call it 3D, whether you want to call it a simulation, if you want to call it a biosphere, if you want to go to the explanation that was put forward by the P's through Barbara Messiniak, for instance, whatever resonates with you. The idea here is that we come into this experience of physicality to learn how to be divine conscious beings in physicality. And so you go into relationship, it's very mental, it's the harvest, and then it's the darkness, right? You go into the dark time in order to establish, the direct experience of being in relationship. Now we're going through Sagittarius season right now still. The sun is in conjunction to the galactic center right now. So we had a lot of flaring that was going on. We can talk more about that, but I already put up a video about that already, directly addressing the impact of the solar flares, how people were getting sick, people were getting inflammation, people were having all kinds of issues in their bodies in relation to this, and how the Schumann resonance was responding beforehand. And we'll look a little bit at that today as well, because I really do want to focus mostly on the solstice itself and what to expect in the next coming months. We're going to have a new moon as well on the 23rd in Capricorn, and this is really going to set the tone for the month and how we address and what types of seeds we want to plant for ourselves spiritually and through our own internal process of transmutation, right? The sun and the moon representing the two poles of ourselves that are working together. Either they're being challenging each other, they are in a strong connection to each other, they're activating each other, and that's a big part, I think, of the new moon time, is the activation that begins with the intention being set. So there's a lot coming just in this week, and the idea of the hell being now. You go through the Sagittarian time, which is purpose, sincere purpose, meaning that is derived, energy of transmutation, creativity, divine understanding, wisdom, synthesis. And this comes through study. This comes through travel. This comes through cosmic travel. This comes through the experience of being together and the friction that is created through polarity that actually catalyzes something into something else. It's really when we get to Capricorn that we are experiencing what it means to live within the context of what we've created. And for many people, that can be a type of hell. And it's not always easy. It's not always pleasant. And for the most part, the pleasantry is what we are bringing to the table, that we're creating within our relationships, within the holiday season, within our faith in our relationship to the divine, and our participation, and not being held back by the traumas of old experiences, but being very consciously willing to move forward, to heal and transform. But there's no getting out of the materium of the universe once that template is set and begins to crystallize. And this is the Lyran signature to a T, because you really respond by being in communion with what is unfolding or crystallizing, knowing your part and playing it to a T, accepting the darkness of this time as the necessary precursor to the light coming back, or vice versa. If you know that you are at peak light and that it's all downhill from here, right, into the yin season, regardless of where you are. I really don't want to put so much emphasis on the winter solstice in terms of astrology, because it just pretty much negates the entire polarized experience of an entire half of the globe, or the planet, or however you want to look at it. Right? So either way, the pendulum is swinging. And part of that stasis point as the pendulum is swinging is the experience of what seems like stasis, and then everything getting flipped around as you start moving back to the other way. And it's like you get on the ride and then you're there. And there's no stopping the ride. There's no really getting off of the ride in the middle. All you can really do is just experience everything that's going along with it. And you can face it with a sense of fearlessness and ambition and knowing what needs to be done. Or you're going to scream the whole time being like, oh, I don't like this. So there's two examples that I'm already thinking of right now. And they both have to do with amusement parks. So one, if you've ever been on that galleon ship, right? Where it goes back and forth and you reach the point at the top and it's all weightless, right? And you're just like, whoa, what's happening? And then it swings down again and you keep doing it. So that's one way to think about it if you're really into that type of imagery. And you truly do see this as all an amusement, right? Or a ride in some ways. And again, the Lyran... The Lyran signature is really helpful if you're a Lyran starseed, if you identify with that at all. It's really helpful because there's a sense of real fearlessness that goes along with being a Lyran starseed, where you do the things that other people are like, you know what, I don't really want to do that. So the other thing I'm thinking about is my little nephew. This is years and years and years ago. We went to the local amusement park called Knoebels. I know some of you know what I'm talking about. And in the kiddie zone, the little kids zone, they have one of those rides that takes you up and then free falls you. But it's just for little kids. But as a little child, it's just as big and scary as the one you would go to like at Six Flags, right? That takes you hundreds of feet in the air and drops you. So my nephew, fearless as he is, was just like, I want to do it. And he's on there and it starts taking him up and we're all watching him. And he's just like, yay. And he gets to the top and his eyes get all big and they drop him. And that child, I mean, it was in that moment that like his entire life flashed before his eyes. And he was just like, what have I done? And he was genuinely freaked out and was crying when he got off. And it was really hard to watch that, even though you knew as the paternal or parental figures, the adults in the situation, you knew that he was going to be fine because you know all of everything that's involved with that process, but there's nothing you can really do. And I feel like that our oversoul, our higher self, and if you identify with a benevolent creator, regardless of your belief system, I feel like there's a part of us that is in fact holding that space and knows that we are getting on this ride in some ways, and our sense of power and control, that's a big one, and our sense of safety is really going to be compromised. And the new moon in particular, I'm not going to go into it too much in this transmission because there's going to be lots of content coming out. Of course, we're going to be doing the Capricorn new moon forecast for all the Capricorn people. That'll be coming out this week. And if you're part of the membership, you're going to get your weekly astrology, and we will focus on that considerably in terms of the more concentrated themes that we'll look at in the short term. But I do get this sense that there's a lot of potential powerlessness that may be showing up in our experience, and it very well could feel like our own personal hell. And this is such a great time of the year to establish what are your true blessings. What is it that allows you to feel safe and secure and in control of yourself when everything around you may feel like it's out of control, especially because you made the decision to get on the ride not knowing what to expect because it's your first time doing it, or you are young, or you maybe forgot, right? That can happen as well. So it's not that there isn't something. There's obviously a light. I mean, that's the whole thing about the solstice. You saw the thumbnail for this image, and you know that Stonehenge, Newgrange, all of these stone circles, these pyramids, all of these huge monuments were really built as calendars, as a means to utilize the cosmic clock so that we know, when we can start making preparations, when we can actually start focusing on the return of the light, especially in the northern hemisphere with the solstice. But it goes both ways, and I think it's very interesting that we even have that dichotomy just on this plane of existence, that the two sides of the planet have that experience as well. So we'll go into the reading and the astrology of all of this, but it's not exactly comfortable to go through hell. And I discovered not that long ago that in ancient Greek mythology, the underworld for the Titans was actually considered had the title Tartarus. Okay. That's very interesting to me. People who are in this whole Tartaria narrative, I want you to really think about this. That in ancient Greek mythology, the Titans had an underworld called Tartarus. What if that's here? And what if that is the fall? And not the fall so much of, the fall of coming into physicality, whether by choice or by evolutionary necessity, it still happens. And it can feel like its own personal hell in that situation and being trapped. And we will do things to destroy everything that we have built up in terms of communal effort and consolidation if we feel trapped. And these themes are really, really strong. And I would urge you, I would invite you. How about that? I would invite you to consider that as we are now about to embark on the solstice and the pendulum is going to swing. So when we look at the general astrology for this broadcast, we'll get some more information about what to expect. Like, what are the big markers to expect between now and the vernal equinox, okay? So I'm going to check in with the stream here and make sure everything is running smoothly. Star T, so happy I could be here for a live. I am so stoked that you're here as well. I've really enjoyed your comments so far. I'm writing a book about the idea of this reality being hell, actually. Well, of course you're here right now to be part of this conversation. It's fiction, and it's about the hero's journey. Either way, if this is hell, we are still on our own hero's journey. Absolutely. I love that, and I am looking forward to the release of this story whenever it happens. And I think what ends up happening, I would love to speak to this further before we get into the nuts and bolts of this transmission, but the idea here that, I've been talking a lot about simulation theory, and it kind of lands in different ways for people, and it's in no way me saying this is what is. This is just another data point that I'm bringing forward. So, And one of the conversations that I just had this morning, even, it's an ongoing conversation about this, and what does this mean, right? And so the idea is that if you consider the idea of a simulation or the living library, for instance, of the keys to the living library, that's something that's come through Barbara Marciniak and her channeling of the P's, and the idea that it's somehow some sort of computer code or artificial intelligence, that remains to be seen. But something had to program that even to begin with. So the idea that even it really has a lot to do with perspective, wouldn't you say? In terms of, oh, wow, that's really soon, January, to be publishing that. That's really soon. I'm happy to hear that. Congratulations. I do feel like January into February, especially February, wow, is going to be a big point. And we know that that's the beginning of the Chinese New Year. In February, the sun comes into Pisces at the end of February. There's always so much happening at that time, but anyway, if you feel that you are trapped in this place, then you are going to act accordingly to get out of it, or to find a way to bypass it, or find a way to put yourself in a different position, I don't know, into a human body, for instance, in order to not be subjected to the depths of that hell based on all the decisions that you have made to get to this place. And it's so easy. It's very quite simple. Redemption is a beautiful thing, and forgiveness is a beautiful thing. And it's kind of like the cheat code, I would say. And it's not even cheating. It's just the cheat code in the video game. I think that's my personal opinion. And so even if we are going through our own personal hell, sometimes that's what we need to do in order to embark on our hero's journey. And I would say that those two things are actually really linked. So Star T, thank you for being here and offering your comments, because I can't even get to tell you how just like perfectly aligned this all is. And waiting for Mars to get out of retrograde is a great idea. And we'll look at that too as we go into the astrology of this season. So anyway, let's get into, I'd love to get into the specifics here. So I just want to show, I just want to show really quickly, because I've already given a lot of energy to the solar areas and the solar energy. And of course, I mean, so much of our calendar is solar based, and so much of our experience is based on a solar calendar. So I totally get that, and I don't want to exclusively focus on that. But if we're going to talk about the solstices and the equinox, we kind of have to, right? Like, that's what it's all based on. So the only thing I really want to share coming into this season, and when we're talking about the solar weather, and I'm really big on understanding what this means, because again, it'll be really easy to be for this to be misrepresented, to just be given information that's not accurate about what the sun is doing based on what we're being told, without an understanding how to read the data ourselves. So the Schumann, for the most part, has been pretty mellow. And you can see that it's starting to pick up just a little bit. Now, you can even see in the amplification, it has not gotten very loud. Although Bennett's Suspicious Observers did address the Schumann, a question about the Schumann, really directly, actually, which I was really pleased by, because he hasn't really fully engaged that subject as much as I personally would like, and maybe I should just ask him the questions. But somebody asked about the Schumann, and of course he talked about the enhanced impact on the Schumann based on the magnetic field itself diminishing, which is part of the galactic reversal, magnetic reversal, and also lightning. So lightning is also part of the impact on the ionosphere and the Schumann. So that's something that is worth considering as well, is that these types of experiences, lightning and the weakening magnetic field having allowing for a more impactful experience of solar weather, is two of the main issues with the Schumann. So keeping it simple, instead of getting caught up so much in all of the, like, exclusively all of the woo-woo, and realize that there is a relationship here. And in fact, that was the whole point of us being here in this experience, is the relationship between the material existence being a divinely immortal being in this experience. So anyway, the point is here that you see that the Schumann it's not very loud in its amplification, but it is starting to move around a little bit. And this is what we saw last time before the Schumann got really, or before the sun started popping off. There were like between 15 and 20 solar flares that were M class during that time. And that's pretty substantial. Now, the other thing that was interesting is the quality of the Schumann started to get erratic and not very consistent. And you can see between yesterday and today, this one very stable line of the quality of the Schumann spiked right up and has spiked right down again. So something else has been impacting the quality of the Schumann. And I often will attribute this to the quality or the tone, right? If the Schumann is an expression of the electromagnetic frequency and the wavelengths, right? Think about it as sound, and the amplification is the volume, the quality is the quality of the tone, and the frequency is the pitch itself. So the quality, at least on some of these levels, took a big jump somehow between yesterday and today. And according to spaceweather.com, which is the link that I'm allowed to share with you without getting flagged anymore, here, let me find this. You can see that in the last day or so, the solar wind has increased and stayed steady. The solar, the density, right? The plasma stream is starting to get more dense, and there is geomagnetic unrest. And in fact, I actually do want to show you the KP index of this real quick. And I know some people are probably like, we know all this already because we've been following it ourselves, but not everybody has. And the best way to like really start learning something is practicing it over and over. So you can even see in the last day that the KP index, the geomagnetic disturbance, has started to increase and in fact went into storm conditions a little bit. And that has a lot to do with the fact that we have these two coronal holes that are, whoops, let me see here, are facing us, and we're about to get those wind streams as well, these two right here. So we're anticipating an increase in solar activity, which means more lightning, which means more auroras, which means more disturbances in the Schumann resonance, right? And in response to that. So just paying attention to what is happening is really beneficial. And also, like how all these people got sick, inflammation through the roof, right? Headaches, inflammation, mood disturbances, all of these things. And light is different than these plasma streams. It takes days for the plasma to get to us because it's matter. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. So it's getting to us in 8 minutes. Supposedly. So that had a really immediate impact and will continue to have an immediate impact whenever the sun flares. So there's these big sunspots that are turning out of view, and there's a really big complex that's turning into view. So let's just see what happens as we go through the week, and we are anticipating more of this. And of course, the big issue here is that the Arctic blast is on its way. Oops. Uh-oh. How did I do this? Oh, there we go. How did I turn myself? Oh, guys, I'm so sorry. In the meantime, I think what I'll do is bring up the reading and see if I can fix my video window. I might not be able to do it in this time frame. So, but it doesn't matter, because what we really want to look at here is the reading for today. So what I want to show you first is last week's reading. So if you remember, here we go. If you remember, last week's reading was really, really favorable. We had the Ace of Discs and the Emperor, right? That is, by the way, I feel like is really related to the fact, Jupiter coming into Aries tomorrow. It's going to square the sun directly at that 0 degrees mark of Aries and Capricorn. This is a pretty fundamental moment here. But we saw that there was last week this real opportunity here to also be in true freedom of the mind in order to bring forward that which will allow us to gain in a very material way, right? The 9 of Discs is the outcome, and establishing a need for balance, that we need to find balance within ourselves. We need to act in a way that achieves balance so that what comes forward or what comes out of or harmonizes with the Akashic field, right? That one of forces is in balance with us and not pulled necessarily into the game, right? The agenda, the chess game, as it were. So now I want to show you the reading. And this reading was specifically with the solstice in mind. That was the intention behind... Oh man, I don't know how to fix this, so I'll have to do it later. So the intention here was for the whole solstice period. And, you can't really make this stuff up here because not only did we have the 10 of discs, right? The natural linear progression from the 9, which is wealth, right? All of the material security. You come into the centerpiece of this reading, which is the 4 of discs, which is power, and it's reversed in this reading. And so we'll go into the specifics of that, but 4 of discs is represented by the sun in Capricorn, which is, of course, our December solstice point. Now, it represents the sun in the last decan of Capricorn, which is the last 30 degrees, but what's there right now? Pluto's there right now. What will soon be there? Mercury will definitely be there. In fact, Mercury and Venus will be conjunct in the last 10 degrees of Capricorn, and right after Mercury stations retrograde. So we're going to have a Mercury retrograde starting in Capricorn here as well during this time. And what is the outcome? What is our effect of our cause and effect relationship? Well, it's the Prince of Wands, right? The fire of the mind, the hot storm, the willful, impulsive energies that's full of tenacity and courage, but also delays will provoke outbursts because we want it now. The Prince of Wands wants it and wants it now. And with a 4 of discs reversed and the power that may feel like we have lost or is getting taken away, you can bet that there will be actual responses from actual people or within ourselves that are going to really storm forward into this flaming perspective. And how we manage that is going to have a lot to do, I think, with where our vertical axis of power really lies, which is not very feeling very powerful or feeling very secure in our ability and our authority to create ourselves, I think. And again, I know, and I'm fully transparent about that, any reader has the possibility of projecting themselves onto what they're reading. And absolutely, I can identify with this. But I also know through my personal experience and conversations with other people that I am not the only one that is feeling like this or experiencing this. So it's something to consider on the general, collective stage here, especially with Pluto in Capricorn and what it means right now. Because our real power, our own real inner power, I feel, is going to come from our ability to face this karmic confrontation and be able to experience a successful catharsis as a result of it. And in fact, it seems like it was kind of built into the system in some ways to experience it at this point in time. So, and there's nothing wrong with the Prince of Wands. Like I said, endless courage and tenacity that we're going to see here. But it also, there's not a lot of patience, and there's a lot of outbursts and a lot of trickster energy that comes along with this as well. So let's start at the beginning here, my friends. 10 of discs, the wealth, right? The wealth. Oh boy, I gotta boot somebody from the chat real quick, guys. Hold on 1 second. Yes, get out of here. All right. And remove. This is why a moderator is probably a really good thing. So put user in timeout. I guess you're doing something right if you're getting the porn bots in your chat, in your tiny little chat here on Monday morning. So anyway, guys, sorry. 10 of discs, right? Wealth. This is where the point where the richest potentials unfold, right? The completion of the work. And not only this is the end of the suit of discs, I mean, it kind of is the end of the entire minor arcana from what I can tell. So there's a completion of the work. There's material security with the 10 of discs. There's well-being. There's stability. There's a legacy. There's a long-term wealth and security that comes here. But this is Mercury in Virgo. I think this is very interesting to consider because Virgo is not the same as Capricorn. Virgo is the individual works and labors, right? It is the coming to fruition. It is the maturing of the fruit. It is the way that we internally transmute our energy into something more than ourselves that will be offered into the social contract. Okay, so we come from this moment and this realization of material security, well-being, and the point where the richest potentials unfold, and it meets this four of discs power. So you can see that it doesn't look very different when it's reversed. You still have this moat surrounding this square internal structure here, all these four corners. You still have the sun shining in from one direction, the Capricorn energy that is the laneway, right? It goes through the archway into this structure that represents power. And so when this is reversed, you can imagine all of the ways that this type of energy is in fact a negative thing. There's an over-attachment to comfort or possessions. And what does that lead to? Fear of loss and failure. I'll tell you what, there's nothing that fails quite like success. And that's a bitter, jagged pill to swallow when you've really been working hard on something and you have to live through your own personal hell of all of the failures. And one of the great things about this, though, is that you learn so much from these situations, and it's really facing the fear of these things because they're inevitable, right? That's part of the system that we are in of death and rebirth, is that the loss and the failure or the destruction that leads to regeneration is part of the package here. And when we become over-attached to the comforts, the possessions of tradition, of culture, of institutions, of an economy, for instance, this over-attachment can lead to this fear. And what does that fear of failure lead to? It leads to greed. It leads to avarice. It leads to a false sense of security. Or in fact, a false sense of security will lead to the fear of loss and failure. And this is where we do ask, what are our true blessings? Okay? Because otherwise, if we are attached to the things that Pluto is absolutely in the process of transmuting and transforming, we may find ourselves acting out of that fear and loss, especially because at the new moon, Chiron is stationing direct. And so it's been painful with Chiron and Aries, but I assure you we're going to be kind of encouraged or triggered into acting on those types of wounds or a sense of worthlessness. What is our worth? What is our subjective identity and who we are, our inner child is represented by Aries in a lot of ways. So that's something to consider, that Chiron's going to station direct at the Cap new moon right after the solstice. And I suspect that once Chiron is direct, those internalized experiences are either going to be triggered for us to either bypass through our savior mechanism. We may continue to feed the whole victim narrative for ourselves. That's a big one that I think is going to come through and keep us from actually surrendering to our own suffering as the means in which we can actually empathize with material reality. So those of you who have are members, then we've done a whole series on Chiron and what it represents and how it carries the Christ frequency. And in fact, I've been reading Chiron as the ruler of Virgo. So that's the other thing. We have all the richest potentials to unfold, but where did they come from? Did they come from strictly, a by-the-book type of empirical, emotionless, detached type of cold, sterile, scientific materialism, or has it come through a more dedicated process of inner transformation? That's going to have a big impact on how we really approach a lot of this. So That's the center to be Sun in Capricorn like this in its reversal, knowing what the new moon really is representing. I mean, you can't can't make this. I mean, I guess I could make this up. I don't know why I'd want to give this reading, because it does show that there is a deep sense of disempowerment that we may be feeling. Where are our root systems? Because the winds of change and conflict are blowing, and they may be blowing more within our internal subconscious realm. It may be blowing through the material aspect that we are rooted to in those lower chakras. It's important that we stay flexible rather than trying to fight it. Again, when we try to fight something that appears to be challenging our ability to have security and power and control, we may do more damage in that process and waste the resources we've spent all this time building. So it's important that we bend with the demands of the time rather than breaking. Even if we feel like there's a total upheaval that's happening, it's important to stay centered and adaptable within the circumstances that are swirling around, and rely on the roots that we have been allowing to grow down and deeply, and to ground ourselves in this wisdom. And again, you're talking about strong Cancerian energy, which is Lilith, and Pallas Athena is also right there in its retrograde in Cancer, these last degrees of Cancer. And so there's so much wisdom and so much stability in our own root system. And that can be your stabilization to the world around you through your emotional security, through your family, through the emotional security of your spiritual community, just your inner and personal life. It doesn't have to take any specific image as much as what is it that holds you so you can continue to be emotionally vulnerable and also commit to and express a loyalty to and consolidate that power in your own way. But this Two of Forces reversed really does suggest that the winds of change are going to be blowing in, and we may not necessarily see them fully yet, but they are in those lower areas that tie us to this experience, and also deeply within our subconscious. And it will, I feel like, be a deep kind of conflict that'll really challenge people to stay flexible and to bend rather than break. And in terms of where our attention really is, I mean, also when you have the One of Keys like this in its reversal, again, plans have changed or fallen through, or we've lost our belief in our own ability to build, right? Or our own personal authority. It's really important that we don't give up, right? When you have the One of Keys reversed, it's one of the main signals of don't give up. It's time to work the plan. And that's a big indication, in my opinion, of you work the plan. And the plan is the crystallization of all of that Sagittarian energy that is the paradigm, which is our own belief systems. It's the pattern of meaning and gives us purpose, right? And now it's crystallizing. So it's time to work the plan, or you are just in the plan and you're just unfolding with it. And so it can feel like a personal hell no matter what. The plan, it may be in a state of collapse. That's the other thing. And it's time to start a new one, right? So you consider some actions that you can take to reclaim your power and start something new. There's a lot of, again, the pendulum swinging the other way, and plans have changed, or there's some sort of collapse or conflict that is really at the root or at the seed of what we are all kind of dealing with, and is really a big part of our own, I would say, a really big part of the societal experience as well. But it's very much embedded in our, in our energetic axis right now. Okay. And to go through the season. I think that's the other thing too, because it's one thing in Capricorn, once you get into Aquarius and especially Pisces season, oh my gosh, it is where you really just don't, your sense of personal agency becomes so enmeshed in the collective that people get, it's very easy to get lost in that situation. And so what to expect? Like I said, here is the Prince of Wands, the firestorm of the mind. Now, you can see that this individual is being pulled in a chariot by the lion. There's that Leo heart, right? And that came through with the moon in Leo as we were being impacted by that solar flaring activity. So, and Leo is the sign of the sun. It's our heart. It is our vital energy that spreads throughout our entire body as an organism, or the collective as an organism. So it's really drawing us our own sense of vitality and sovereignty and authenticity. But and it comes from a place, again, of being very established and grounded. That's that chariot energy. That's a Cancer energy all day long. This is intellect, the storm within the spiritual flame. It's not enough to have the spiritual flame. You got to blow on it to get it to spread, right? The hot storm filled with action and willful, impulsive energies here. And we want it all right now. So delays will provoke outbursts. Delays will provoke battles and struggles that may destroy things in the burning. But there's also endless courage and tenacity with this. And so the thing, and it is upright. So I really do feel like that ultimately that the riches are unfolding, right? The sense of material completion within ourselves with the 10 of discs is really strong and leads to a strong foundation that allows our hearts to pull us, and our passions, right? To pull us where we're going, as opposed to being impacted by a seemingly loss of control, or our experience of being in hell, for instance, as being the thing that motivates our behavior. So either way, the behavior will be motivated. And if it's passion, or if it is conceit or narcissism or lust or a sense of risk that is part of what is driving us, either way, we're going to get it. It has a lot to do how we're addressing this energy. And it is really showing up as our authority and our inner power and stability really being challenged. Okay. So, the guidance around this. Number one, the King of Roses is reversed. And so again, more disruption in a relationship with a masculine energy in your life, whether it be you, whether it be some sort of man in your life, or there's an outer persona that represents this, right? The King of Roses is the passion and the purity, the loving type of paternal energy, right? Of husband, of father, of someone who is truly invested in nurturing and growth and puts his attention on this. So it's important not to get swept away in the upheaval, okay? And with every ending comes a new beginning. And it's maybe this is time to let go of an attachment to an old love or an old type of energy that is, it's time to go. It's already over, but the thing that remains is our attachment to it. And I think that strikes me as very important. And it's also time to create a new pattern that isn't based on self-negation and certainly not falsehood. And we do have power to take control of our perspective, okay? And this is, again, reminding that maybe we need to come back with that focus, just like this King of Roses is really focused on the rose in front of him in this garden, and really getting off his own throne in some ways to engage with this process in order to not get swept away by the upheaval. And I do feel like that the upheaval is really strongly indicated by this Two of Forces reversed. And we have the grouse. Wow, we haven't seen the grouse in a long time. The last time I downloaded this images was last February. So I think that's very interesting too when it comes to rhythm and movement and all of the ways that you can tap into rhythm and harmonics and the natural frequency of the planet, okay, and of nature herself. Because, and allowing ourselves to surrender to this pulse, because this is what guides us. Just like animals that are migrating through their ability to connect with the electromagnetic field. This is actually a conversation that came up in our private Telegram group for the Starseed Fellowship. Is that, animals migrate based on their ability to tap into this field. Now, there's a lot of anomalous activity happening here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's definitively good or bad. It's about tapping into this flow so it will guide us, right? Now, what if you're tapping into something that is artificial, which is something that is happening, I feel like, or just the change in the magnetic field as a result of larger cosmic issues? That can also be it as well. Either way, it's about connecting in. And look, the grouse is a bird that is on the ground. So now we have the spiritual, transcendent part of ourselves coming back down to materiality. And the migrating bird has been a big, for me personally, has been a huge totem and has been coming through in terms of guidance for me in the last many weeks. And every time I see a bird coming down onto the ground, or a type of bird that is grouse can fly, but they primarily live on the ground. There's something about this tapping into the harmonics. Maybe you need to literally put your bare feet on the earth, right? Or find a way to connect back into the natural flow of things in order to get yourself back into a state of personal power, because the upheaval collectively and institutionally can be very destabilizing. Okay, so this is a pretty strong energy that's coming through. And gosh, I can't even tell you the last time I saw the pig or the boar come up in a reading. This is about facing your problems head on with confidence, with a sense of responsibility. Confront your adverse situations directly, rather than getting caught up in the fantasy of everything, or to bypass it. And again, Chiron is going to be such a big part of this. And in fact, Venus is in a square to Chiron today. There's a yod with our Scorpio moon with Chiron and Mars, right? They're in an exact sextile today. And the moon in Scorpio at 12 degrees of Scorpio. What's that? That's with the south node of the moon. There is a way here that we can use this energy within ourselves to go deeper into our investigation within ourselves. But we have to confront this situation directly and take that negative energy of whatever problem and transmute it into new reality. I know that it's really hard to hear when they're like, take that word problem and substitute opportunity. And when you are like really going through hell, that is something that it's very difficult to hear that and to intellectualize that. But I think one way that you can do that is the energy that you are experiencing in the course of your problem, whatever it is, right? Whatever your personal hell is. It's the energy in that situation that becomes the catalyzing force for, the Philosopher's Stone, for turning something plain into something precious, right? Even if it's the problem is, in fact, the thing that puts you back onto your soul's mission. But we can't do that if we are being unrealistic about what we're doing. And part of that is bringing that energy, or bringing that spiritual experience represented by the bird, back down to reality here, and be realistic with yourself and not be afraid. Again, there's this Lyran thing here of not being afraid to confront these situations, to have a fearlessness, to have a sense of, I know what it takes to reach these goals. And it's not all easy, and it's not always in line with what we want to experience, okay? I haven't seen this in a while, so that says a lot to me in terms of, confronting our problems and not losing a sense of our own agency in constructing ourselves in the face of it. And then this is so beautiful. I loved seeing this. I was just like, okay, I know now. Everything's going to be okay. Add some, right? I am here. I am attending to you, right? The number 22. This woman is sitting here. She's reading. She's educating herself. Her companion comes in with more resources, but she is aware that she's surrounded by her angels, by guides, by ancestors. I am here. Spirit is always attending to us. And in my experience, personally, in my journey, my spiritual experience, all of these things, one of the things that I've come to realize is that my guidance is really hands off, unless it's absolutely necessary. And that is for reasons between me, myself, and the divine, right? The sacred. But what I will say is that if you are really struggling and you're reaching that pit of hell, I mean, this is where you acknowledge and ask, right? And become aware that you're always attended to. Like your spirit never leaves you. How could it? I mean, you are a divine being in this experience. So the connection is always there. It's just a matter of recognizing it. And so if you do need a little bit of, or more than a little bit, if you're really down in the pits of your experience, this is a moment that when you recognize that you're always attended to, doesn't that give you the impetus to face your problems head on, to take back your power and authority for yourself and how you are constructing yourself? We're never really alone, ever. And that's not to support that's not to support the tagline now for the newest season of Ancient Aliens, where they've really made the commitment now of not just questioning things, but basically saying, yes, we're never alone, and we've never been alone. And as much as I want to encourage that on a spiritual level, just to be clear here, like, I don't necessarily mean that we're surrounded by ETs necessarily. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. It just reminded me of that because I've been going through their catalog because I'm really interested in deconstructing what is being presented to us in that format so that I can, for my own sake, right, really understand the programming that is going on there. But that's one of the things that they have really committed to, is just like, instead of just asking questions, they're like, oh yeah, they've been here this whole time. So anyway, I love to throw these things in here and see what I can get away with. But add some. I love this, right? I am here. I'm attending to you. And maybe this is something that, like a mantra, we need to recite to ourselves so that we don't give up on ourselves, right? We can't give up on ourselves and everything that we have been building so far, especially if we're afraid we're going to lose it. We will destroy it before we lose it. Ooh. If I can't have it, no one can. Oh, man, that is... I hadn't even thought about that, but that just came through really strong. Hi, Phoenix Rules. Hope you all have a great week. I am so glad that you're here. I hope you have a great week too. I'm sure you're going to be busy baking and cooking and making so many wonderful treats for your family. They are really blessed to have you. Let's just say that. So I am going to transition over to the chart now, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to just look at the general theme here. Now, before we get into that, there's a couple things that I would really love to share with everyone. Before we move on. And I know this is a hard time of year. People are spending their resources on gifts and all of that stuff. But what I'd like to share with you is just a couple of things that I have available if you are interested. So one of the things is that I do have a reading called Crystallization. So here's Newgrange. This is the light coming through Newgrange at the solstice. Same thing. Newgrange is in Ireland. Stonehenge is in England. There is something really strong about that part of the world in terms of these nodal points. But we're looking at the seasonal forecast for you, your individual chart, so your natal chart, your progressions, your starseed markings. All of these things factor into a forecast between now and the vernal equinox. So this is bookable for $99. It's on sale. It's a 90-minute reading, and if you are a paying member through Subscribestar, you have your own special promo code that you can add when you book, and you get 10% off just because you are part of the Starseed Fellowship. So that's something that is available through catalystenergies.net, linked in the description box if you're interested. I just dropped the first of the Luna sessions to the Catalyst Classroom membership, where we're going to be talking all about the moon through the next couple of sessions. And boy, it is bringing up so much, right? Because not only are we this first session talking about natural history, the physical characteristics, lunar astronomy, but if you're not familiar with the lunar wave, we also just kind of blow all of this information kind of out of the water with just that one piece of video footage of the lunar wave. And so for those of you who've already watched this or are familiar with the lunar wave, you already know what I'm talking about. If you're not, you may want to just like kind of reach out and be like, what's this lunar wave all about? And we're going to keep going through these Luna sessions, of course, talking about the astrology of the moon, the lunation cycle, and get real into the esoteric aspect. And of course, all of the stuff around our moon and what it actually is, what we think it is, what it's not, right? So that is something that is already available for the membership. Again, everything you need is in the description box below in order to tap into that. Now, Cancer and Capricorn people, just to, again, just to show you and be forthcoming about what's going on. This is your month, and so the lunar transit forecast for you is at the sale rate. So you can again book through catalystenergies.net through the bookings tab, and you book the sale rate. So Capricorn or Cancer, Sun, Moon, or Rising has access to this. Of course, if you're a member, then you have access to the sale rate no matter what your sign is. At any point, you can access this lunar transit forecast, and this is just looking at the lunar month, the lunar cycle that we're in, to get an idea of how a more concentrated block of time may be impacting you. Again, natal chart, progress chart, starseed markings, you get the whole picture. Again, catalystenergies.net has everything you need in relation to that. And I also wanted to share with you my gift exchange, but I didn't upload the graphic for that. So I will put it on the community tab for YouTube, of course, and if you're interested in that, because that's going to be a great way, I would say, let me bring up the chart here. That's going to be a great way for you to get an idea of what membership really entails, because that's one of the gifts that I'm offering is a free month of membership. And that comes with an exchange with for a review or a testimonial on my website or a paid referral. I'm also offering that free month as well. So now that we got all of the promotional stuff out of the way, let's start looking at some astrology here. So this is today, the 19th. And like I said, Venus in a square to Chiron, this yod with the Scorpio moon and Chiron and Mars, right, in a sextile. And so a yod or finger of God is 2 points in a sextile, and each of those points are in a quincunx to one other point. And that is, in fact, the finger of God, the yod. So quincunx is this 150-degree angle that doesn't fit. It's a 5 out of 12. It represents the opportunity for an adjustment through some sort of wild card, some sort of thing that doesn't seem to fit. This is where we transmute, right? This is also the 7 in numerology kind of represents this as well, the fall from grace that allows for the divine intervention, right, and perfection. So, but there's a lot of connections to Chiron right now in just today. And I would say that that's really important, considering that at the new moon on the 23rd, Chiron's going to station. So I think being aware of all of the relationships with Chiron and Aries right now is really important. And there's something here with Mars in its retrograde that is bringing our action and our sense of desire and potency to act. Maybe in terms of what is it that, how do we completely liberate ourselves from our past in order to move towards our future? And the Gemini archetype really does encompass this past into future experience as two sides of the pendulum, so to speak. And so even with Mars in its retrograde, right, that is still having us, either engage in active listening through our communication. Maybe we're going, our curiosity is leading us back over territory we've already explored. We're not necessarily pioneering anything new as much as going over it, proofreading it, a switchback, right, through what we have been learning and discovering so far. And how has that total liquidation of the past really gone for us so far? Have we actually let go of who we've been, or these old ideas that are holding us back from stepping into the next phase? I think these are good questions with Mars in its retrograde. A sextile is a 60-degree angle that requires our participation, but is still harmonious. It is the place like the sixth house where we transmute, where we engage in some sort of inner transformation by facing our challenges or our crises or hidden enemies, all of that sixth house stuff. And of course, this is where Chiron rules, is the sixth house, which is Virgo. But over here in Aries, I mean, we're just still working with the wound of our impulse to even be here, right? Our inner child. And I would say the spark of life, okay? The spark of life. And it's one of the things that makes sense to me. If you look at all three of the fire signs in the zodiac, you have Aries, which is like the electrical fire. It's the spark, right? Leo, representing the solar energy, is the combustion, right? The combustion and release of the solar energy. And Sagittarius is the coal fire. It is the friction that is created when matter is going through its process of being destroyed by fire, which simultaneously brings forward new creation in one action. Okay, this is important to remember because it is the fire. It's the fire itself that Sagittarius represents, and the sun's been going through that. And so we have a sense of identifying with the purpose of all of this friction, the purpose and where it's taking us and the meaning of all of this. The Aries energy is kind of like the lightning bolt that brings Frankenstein's monster to life. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because I'm reading Frankenstein right now. And so that's the electrical bolt. Now, something to keep in mind just in this week is that Jupiter is going to come into Aries tomorrow. And then it's going to be in a square with our solstice sun at 0 degrees Capricorn, which represents power in itself and our latent ability to step into a position of leadership and power within, wherever we are. So knowing where Capricorn is in your chart is going to show you the area of life that this is most likely to be experienced and identified with. Many people have 0 degrees Capricorn somewhere in their chart, which is also a big starseed activation too. 0 degrees anywhere is kind of like this crack between worlds, and 0 degrees Capricorn is actually in a trine to Andromeda, stars in the Andromeda galaxy. So specifically 0 degrees Taurus. So 0 degrees Aries, though, is the spark. It's the lightning bolt that brings life to something that was inanimate. And Jupiter is famous for casting thunderbolts everywhere. And so when Jupiter comes into Aries, the full picture, the meaning, the big picture that Jupiter represents, the cosmic consciousness that Jupiter in Pisces has been working with and representing, the full spiritual picture, as well as the full cultural picture of Sagittarius, is something that that template is what we are bringing into the new seed point. And with Jupiter, it will be activated and have this really bold and enterprising energy coming into Aries. Now, the fact that Chiron's about to station direct right as this is all happening, I think is really important because we are still struggling with the experience of ideal cosmic the ideal cosmic framework, but coming into a seed point of experience means we will inevitably have to bump up against reality, materiality, especially as a conscious human, right? The seed goes into the soil with the intention that all of the perfection of the seed and encapsulate it is going to break open. And then you have to go through the entire cycle of materiality. And so we've been really struggling with this and what this really means. And I think so. I think there's been a lot of struggle with it. There's a lot of internal struggle with it. Now it's going to start being exteriorized when Chiron starts moving direct. It's going to start being acted upon, something that we are working with out in the exoteric world. And what vision what spiritual vision, what transcendent cosmic vision is being brought into this new seed point? What is it that Zeus is going to throw this thunderbolt at and animate or bring to life? And it has everything to do with what is it that we are, what is the archetype of everything we have been coming into this next cycle? What does it really represent? And I think the struggle is, of course, with the sun square Jupiter. I mean, it's real easy to get kind of cocky about things, especially the sun coming into Capricorn, is the idea that we, if we are not tapped into our true blessings, if we're still kind of focused on the external or the surface level of things, if we haven't really acknowledged that our true blessing is our relationships to each other and the way that our root system stabilizes us to reality, I think that this square is going to bring it right out, and in a good way. I think we need this. I think we actually do need some level of like reality check here, so that we are not bringing that hopelessness into that meaning into the seed point that truly will be brought forward in the springtime, or in the, I should say, the vernal equinox, right? When we come to that balance point of light and dark in March. So Jupiter is holding the template and is, like I said, engaging, bringing life to it through the purpose that we are, identifying with. So what's interesting here is that we have a moment right now with the moon in Scorpio, which is actually our own internalized descent into our personal hell, right? As we sink down into the abyss of our experience, we have an opportunity here to really tap into the ways that we have already been empowered by our ability to, find new ways, right? To put together data that doesn't seem to fit together, to invent something new, right? And that's not to say that we are inventing something new in what is already here. And that's going to be one of the biggest pitfalls, I think, considering where Uranus and the North Node are. And as we look at the cycle, even going through this month, but throughout the season, the South Node shows us our default setting. We've already done this, right? And there's an incredible amount of power, just like the tail of the dragon swishing back and forth is the momentum moving forward. I think tapping into this is a remembrance of how we've done this before, either in the past, our past lives, as a collective, we've done it before. And, we've achieved a crowning achievement as a result of this, okay? And this is where this yod really comes in, because we will be, I think, tasked with being able to liquidate ourselves, liquidate the past of who we've been totally. And maybe that's something that we are internalizing right now with these two retrogrades, but this yod is pretty powerful in this way to show us and have us tap into the experience of this already. And not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but to remember that this is not the direction we're headed, but is the momentum pushing us forward. And you also see that Lilith is opposite Pluto, right? The real demolition, I think, has been happening for a while, but it's really going to start amping up now. Venus in a square to Chiron is a challenge in some ways to, again, look at what it is that the ability to explore really these unfamiliar realms of the materium and discover the laws that underlie them, right? It's not so much just accepting it, but this is about exploration, getting into what makes it all tick, right? And the positive impact of this particular degree is self-confidence through the acquisition of knowledge and effective self-direction. to apply these values, right? It is our function to be fully conscious of all life forms and all natural processes. Why else are we here other than to fully become aware of how it all fits together and our role within it, okay? And so the square to Chiron again is bringing out this like kind of inner child struggle with the reality of when we come into form, even though we have divinity encapsulated within ourself, we still have to live through the process of the natural world. And if we have the ability and the fearlessness to really explore these realms, you know, bringing that Lyran aspect into the picture, I think that we're going to have very effective self-direction. And remember, Venus is about value, right? She represents value, certainly within the material, especially in Capricorn, the value of these material structures, but also the value of understanding how it all fits together. Because when you understand how it all fits together, how it works, how the fractal unfolds, what's the equation? Once you discover what those laws are, then you understand your part in the whole thing, and you actually can direct yourself very effectively, as opposed to being in resistance and risking the destruction of things just because it's not meeting this very innocent and almost childlike standard of what it's supposed to be. Because you know, that is the seed will always germinate and unfold, right? That's the whole point of it. But when you live through your own personal hell, you realize that you have to live with the consequences of your actions and decisions at a fundamentally collective level. And there is true blessing in our connection to each other, even if things aren't unfolding the way that our ego necessarily wants. And I think that's, again, going to be the big Chiron issue with all of this, okay? What else is happening today? Asteroid Ceres is now in Libra. Speaking of growth and harvest, I mean, she is now in the sign of the harvest, and becoming a pure embodiment of the archetype of the human, right? It's a new process, and the human is made sacred by stepping into relationship with life, right? And so we're awakening to the need to be more focused on this, and instead of surrendering ourselves and conforming, right? I mean, it's not about that. It's about it really is. And when we're talking about Ceres, she is the goddess of that which grows, the agriculture. So again, it's everything that we are developing and maturing and coming to fruition within ourselves is meant to be offered into the harvest, okay? Because that's part of what we're doing here. And she really represents that now that she's come into the sign of Libra. So we talked about the one thing I want to bring up before we move into the larger astrology for this season is that Venus will also come into aspects with the moon's nodes as well. And this is about the reverence of fire. And the Sabian symbol is a fire worshiper. And it's not so much to suggest the worshiping of fire, but the reverence of it, for the understanding of what it represents. And there's no phoenix rising from the ashes without the fire to burn it all down, okay? And that's very difficult when you rely exclusively on the structures of the materium that have given you, that are surface or have given you security. And we only stand to get stronger and more deeply, what's the word I'm looking for? More deeply stabilized in our own power through this process. And Venus, again, the value, the sense of worth and meaning. And in Capricorn, it's very ancient. There's a sense of aristocracy, and take that very loosely, right? It's not, it's something that has been building over time, something more than just your own satisfaction. Venus in Capricorn is satisfied with not only the fruits of her own labor, but the way that it establishes a network for the entire whole, right? About to be crystallized. So But fire is part of the process. And so having a reverence, having a value of it, a meaning of it, I think is a big part of where we are all being pulled at a soul level. And part of that is the North Node in Taurus is what is necessary in order to carry around we have actual physical baggage to carry in terms of what it is that our ambition is, right? And this is an Earth trine here. It is very stabilized, and part of the ambition of what we want, right? That's about Taurus, is the actual physical resources, the physical value, the actual meaning, the harmonics, right? Part of being here is that we are in relationship to everything else around us, including the natural harmonics of the planet, of nature, of the sun. And we are responsible for being able to carry that. And I think that this trine with Venus is one of those moments that you don't carry it forever, right? It does come around to regeneration, just like the seasons will come around to regeneration. But right now we're in our darkest period. So there's a lot of hope here as well, and a lot of maturity as well. But there's also quite a bit here that suggests that the upheaval is very real and is right around the corner, okay? So, like I said, we have Jupiter coming into Jupiter coming into Aries tomorrow on the 20th, and then we have, the sun, like I said, is at the galactic center, is moving through the last degrees of Sagittarius as well. Lots of starseeds have the galactic center in their chart. It's a juncture point for Arcturus and for Andromeda Galaxy, and also opposite Orion as well. I mean, we're opposite Polaris and Betelgeuse right now. So this galactic center is, like I said, a juncture point with all these starseed origin markings that really bring us into the form of this pattern of meaning is starting to crystallize. We're starting to become aware of it. We're starting to identify with it and identify ourselves with the whole, as opposed to just identified with our own stuff. Okay. Now, everything that is sitting at the bottom of the chart next to Jupiter, that's all in retrograde right now. So when we talk about individual identity and individual expression, right now in the zodiac, it's all retrograde as well. Everything is at the top here is moving forward, right? We have the personal planets and the luminaries, Sun, Moon, Venus, Mercury, but we also have Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune, all direct now as well. These huge transpersonal planets in signs that have to do with the collective. Everything is moving forward. So it's going to be very easy to feel like a victim of circumstance here, but knowing our role and how we have are harmonized with where we are is, well, we're having some insight, I feel like, in a good way right now with the sun conjunct the galactic center. But again, you're talking about your oversoul. You're talking about something more than just your individual personality. It's you are identified with this larger purpose as well. And it's what carries you through. Right? It does. And so when we risk, or the experience is presented of this being taken away, like I said, when we are fear of failure or loss, we can act out in a way that is more in line with the South Node of attempting to invent something new, to go deeper, to establish more of the ritualistic focus in order to bring more power back into the situation. And that's been valuable in terms of understanding faith and cooperation, but it's not where we're going right now. So it's going to be interesting. And I'm just going to look at the solstice itself. The moon, speaking of which, the moon will be in Sagittarius as well, our balsamic moon. Not a great time to make a lot of new decisions about things, of course. But it also, again, will be this time to really tap in individually and emotionally and intuitively to that purpose, to that paradigm, to that meaning that gives us all purpose. That's very important as well. So, and then we come into the solstice, like I said, 0 degrees, 0 degrees. So Sun square Jupiter seems to always be kind of this like ego battle in some ways, and it's not so much ego as much as we can get really caught up in our own identification, right? There's that Prince of Wands that's like pulling the chariot through our own passions in some ways, but it's going to be about leadership, about authority, about a sense of power. And in a square to Jupiter, Jupiter is like, well, you can identify with this all you want, but what is it that you are, do you really have the power to animate life from not life, right? The hubris of Frankenstein is something that really comes to mind, because whatever that is, that imprint is what's going to be encapsulated in our new cycle of growth when it comes to the spring. Okay, so the square might be kind of a doozy, but it's necessary to keep us on track with where we're going. So, and then we're coming into the 23rd, which is our actual new moon. So 1 to 2 degrees of Capricorn is the contrast to leadership, authority, and power, which is the reality that if we are so invested in holding this power that we actually waste the resources in order to do that, that's a war, right? And so the fact that this is the new moon is pretty important to me. And this is also where Chiron stations direct. And so the intention here is, I would recommend intention around this, remembering that this is part of the experience of power, is that you lose power, right? Especially if you're trying to hold on to power. And in the tarot, the 4 of discs, yes, it's power. But if you look at any other type of deck, you will see that there is kind of like this hoarding energy that goes along with Capricorn as well. So you become Ebenezer Scrooge and you hoard everything, and you actually cause more destruction than if you were to openly share it and just be part of the unfolding. So I think that this new moon is going to be really very necessary to set intentions around not wasting our resources by hoarding them, but being able to identify and almost commemorate the times where this has happened before and not forget them, okay? Because then Chiron is direct, and then we're on this whole new pathway of externalizing all of these wounds of self that Chiron represents, okay? Now, and we'll be together on Monday, the 26th for the Starseed ministry after the Christmas holiday. So I won't go in too much to the rest of this. And of course, like I said, there's going to be more content for the new moon in particular. So let's just kind of start looking month to month. I want to show you some general themes here. So we come to the end of January, and what we see is that now Mercury is already stationed retrograde. It will be, let me find my notes here in terms of what day. So what happens is that Mercury and Venus come into a conjunction at 24 to 25 degrees of Capricorn. Yes, on the 29th, actually. So at the end of December, not only does Mercury station retrograde, but it meets Venus at that time. And that's a really strong signature of the reliance on tradition, right? The fact that cultural traditions over time give us something beautiful and artistically beautiful, and something that has taken time and generations to build, to give us a sense of comfort and tradition. And these two come into this conjunction, and then Mercury stations retrograde. So we have a retrograde now coming out of this season, and it will be throughout Capricorn, and by the end of January will start to come direct again. And again, this is going to be about facing fears, establishing trust, being in communion with cosmic rhythm, and what that really means. But by this point, though, Venus has moved well through Aquarius in the next month or so, and is already past a conjunction with Saturn in Aquarius as well. And Venus in Aquarius is, very social in a generalized way. There's a sense of value and meaning of the collective voice, the collective consciousness. At this point, the sun has moved into Aquarius as well, and so and at its detriment, right? It's in the sign opposite of its home, and so it gets very difficult for the individual to really continue to establish a genuine, authentic, and sovereign voice when it's embedded in the entire chorus and the entire collective consciousness. It gets more difficult. And so, this conjunction with Venus and Saturn, it may feel kind of like a brick wall in some ways. Of course, with Saturn, it's going to be more like a force field that you can't get beyond. But the meaning and the value of the collective in basically teaching us how to transmute our emotional energies to something more evolved is going to be a big part of this. And so you see lots of opportunities as we are moving through the season to start establishing a much more balanced and strengthened approach to our relationship with society and what we're here to do. But Mercury is going to go back through Capricorn and say, okay, I got to go through the books again, right? It's literally going to go through the books and go back over all of the numbers that have led us to this point and be like, okay, where did I go wrong? Where are there misrepresentations in this materium? Where has something not been calculated correctly? Mercury is going to be very useful for that as we go through January and come into February. So you also see that we're going to start having a real stack up in Aries, not the least of which is Jupiter and Chiron coming into a conjunction during this time. The other thing that we see is that by the time we get to the end of January, Uranus is direct. Now it's really starting to move around, and Mars is direct. Mars is just coming direct and is in conjunction with Aldebaran. And so that Archangel Michael energy is going to be really strong come the end of mid to end of January as well. So things are going to start really moving by this point. So then when we get to the end of February, as we see here, we're really starting to come into Aries. Of course, the Sun and Saturn were in a conjunction in Aquarius as well, getting to, in fact, it's going to be at the degree of the natal moon of the U.S. chart and is opposite the galactic degree for Atlantis. So it'll be 27 to 28 degrees that the Sun and Saturn, and I think at that point we will become very determined, focused, secure in everything that we have built societally and in terms of the collective consciousness to really hold the energy of everything that we need. There's a sense of intelligent foresight that I think is going to be brought to our awareness and our identity and our sustainment during this time in February as well. And you can see that Pluto and Saturn are really close to the ingress into brand new signs here. We see that Venus is in Aries. Jupiter is just about to make this conjunction with Chiron. The nodes of the moon are moving into really interesting places, and Uranus is moving forward. So by the time we get to I would say by the time, let's go week by week here into March, by the time we get to March or the vernal equinox, we see that Saturn has come into Pisces. And I'm going to create a presentation about this in particular, because I think this has very strong implications with Saturn in Pisces in general. You see that this is where Chiron and Jupiter are in a conjunction with each other. And, are we able to weave the blanket of our own desire, right? Projecting it out into the world. Is it going to be based on these wounds, or is it going to be based on our ability to actually surrender to our own experience and know that we are just as capable of creating a new experience for ourselves? And of course, with Jupiter involved, there's a lot of good fortune and blessing, and a sense again about bold enterprise that's going to be part of this. And we see here as well that soon the sun is going to be in a conjunction with Neptune as we get up to the vernal equinox as well. And there's a really strong consummation point here. And in fact, this is where I feel like that the idea that we're coming back into differentiation again. It'll be really nice with the moon, I think, with the sun moving through Pisces. I know it's a difficult time. It's very easy to kind of like lose yourself in the collective unconscious. And it's a difficult time of year for people because it's really the end of the winter coming into the spring, or just we're coming into that 0 point of the pendulum has been swinging, and we kind of just lose ourselves to the momentum of it. And then the sun reaches Neptune, and it's just kind of this beautiful spiritual experience where we realize that it's time to it's time to differentiate into those new seed points at that point. So things will become so much more clear, I feel like, as we move definitely into the end of February, but certainly as we get close to the vernal equinox. And, Mercury is now in Aries, and Jupiter is in Aries, of course. Venus is at home in Taurus and is basically about to meet the North Node at a degree that is not very easy. And in fact, this is going to be a big part of the next eclipse cycle on April 20th. But in the meantime, Venus and the North Node in a conjunction. This degree is about the impermanence of all of our material bonds and social bonds. It's a widow standing at an open grave. It is very Buddhist, but it's also very difficult as well. And in fact, when we get to not only the equinox where the sun comes into Aries, but when we get to the next eclipse cycle, which is a new moon at the very last degrees of Aries, we're going to be kind of dealing with that there is, in fact, a material boundary that we are still part of and encased by, right? There is no seed germination without the material soil to be embedded within. But in that process, we also have to accept that everything dies. There's no permanence to these material realities, just like in Buddhism. And it's our attachment to these things. And I'll tell you what, Venus in Taurus is definitely attached to her comforts, her securities, her sense of beauty and harmony, and what satisfies her. Okay. And so that's going to be an interesting time. And then, the sun comes into Aries and we move forward into a new season. And Mars at 28 degrees of Gemini, this is Betelgeuse, this is Polaris, and specifically this Sabian symbol is bankruptcy, right? Again, being released from our past, an unbearable pressure here. I think that this is pretty striking, because from here we see that Pluto is going to be moving into Aquarius, like right after, like just 2 or 3 days after the equinox. And we have the stellium in Aries, and Mars is about to move into Cancer, right? And the protective mechanisms of the spiritual and family warrior about to come online big time. And Pluto coming into Aquarius is a whole different ball game. And of course, it will be here for a little bit and then retrograde back into Capricorn. But by the time we get to the equinox in September, I mean, Saturn and Pluto will be permanently in their ingress into these signs, and there's no going back to what was. And so that's going to be, we're going to be in a whole different world by this point. And in fact, that whole different world is going to really confine us in our own growth when we get to that next eclipse cycle. Wow. Wow, indeed. So, and we will have to just buckle down. Saturn in Pisces, we'll just really have to just settle into the karma of the situation and know that we build ourselves back from that point. So, I mean, I don't want to get, I don't want to present anything in a way that's negative or that there's nothing to hope for. There really is. But we are really being tasked now to acknowledge where our true blessings are, because that's where our permanence in spirit and our connection to each other really is going to be, and not in all of these outer our successes and all of these outer means of security and control. And we're all going to be challenged in different ways to address this over the course of the next couple of months. So that's just a general read for all of this. So I really appreciate you guys going along with me for the ride. And I'm going to leave it there for today's Starseed Ministry and this special transmission for the December solstice and the pendulum about to swing in the other direction. So if you are interested in any of the readings or services, or certainly the gift exchange, you don't even have to have necessarily been a prior client or received a reading. Even if you're just a regular viewer and you've gotten a lot of value out of the content online, you can still leave a testimonial on the website and have access to the free micro reading or the free month of membership. That's totally doable. Anybody that runs a small business knows that word of mouth and positive reviews are like one of the most valuable assets that a small business can have. And so I just want to give back and show my appreciation for everyone that has been part of this journey as Catalyst Energies has grown. So if you're not on my email list, you can do that by going to the website and signing up from there. Or if you're not on social media, I'll be posting all kinds of things to all of those places so that you can know what's going on with Catalyst Energies. And of course, my website is the central nodal point for all of this. So you can always know what's current and what's being offered if you go to catalystenergies.net. So my friends, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I know that this was a very long exchange today as I'm looking at, but that's because we were looking at the entire season and what to expect. So thanks for coming along on this ride. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. I really do truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other the best you can. Have a great holiday season, whatever it is that you celebrate and value. And we will come back together next week for the Starseed Ministry on the 26th. Take care, everyone. Bye.